This week we're on the phone again with Matt Rusk of MGR Music.
This is Anyone Can Play Guitar, the podcast for musicians and music lovers that takes you behind the scenes of the music industry. This week is brought to you in partnership with MGR Music. Ever wanted to learn an instrument, hone your skills, or pick up something completely new? You can get so far by yourself, however professional guidance can make all the difference. With a network of tutors right across the UK and rates starting from as little as £15 per hour, visit mgrmusic.com now to get started.
Hello and welcome to episode 71 and our full interview with Matthew Rusk of MGR Music with me, Ben, and him,
James.
That took a couple of attempts.
It did. I don't know if you forgot who you were, where you were, what you were.
It just fell apart. But what didn't fall apart was the original Rude Boy last week, James. He has a little snippet.
If you see the band, you can see everybody having fun on stage.
Yeah.
It's like a family on stage. We have a laugh.
We do.
Segue.
You brought it back.
Unlike me, James, he'll never let you down.
No, he never has so far.
Not
in
so.
my life.
That's true. But James, you spoke to Matthew Rusk. Can you give us a little bit of a overview of what's going to go on?
Well, yes, I can. We talked about this in one of the episodes that Matthew's featured in previously, but his company was set up basically with a very similar ethos to our podcast.
That's very true.
All about helping musicians on their journey. Specifically, he started teaching the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
He's just so passionate about music.
Yes.
Also a fellow Newcastle United supporter like us. He's just an all-round good guy, loves music, loves helping people. And he's got loads of useful things to share on learning the guitar and some of the other parts around, having a bit of a career in music that's outside of being up there on stage.
Mm-hmm. And listeners to the show will know that MGR Music has been our official partner for season 2.
Indeed, they have. The way I look at it is that you might be completely new and might not be able to play the guitar, or might be in the very early stages. One of the things Matt talks about is how you go about, getting some professional tuition to really sort of take you to that next level and boost any sort of self-learning that you might be doing. But they've got teachers all over the place, not just in the UK now as well. They're doing a bit of expansion into the US, getting a network of teachers over there.
Very good.
I know a lot of listeners over in the US, so worth going. And it's not just guitar either. They're starting to get more and more people from who teach different instruments. So again, you might be in a band, you might be pretty proficient on the guitar, but you might be, want to add keys.
Keys.
Or whatever it might be.
Yes.
And so, there's potentially teachers, or there will be teachers in your area, and they've got a massive database of people who are sort of in a trusted network that you can go to and get good rates, and continue learning your instrument.
And if you enjoy this one, go back in time 7 weeks. And there's the Lee Fuge interview.
That's what you were counting.
That's what I was counting, yes. I was looking suspicious. Counting back on this roster of guests. But yes, 7 weeks ago, episode 65, was Lee Fuge.
Yeah, who's taught, the guitar through MGR, but has also done loads of other bits and pieces with Matthew as well. So, another good guy.
Cool. So, thank you. Straight to Matt this week.
Straight to Matthew. Thank you very much for your time.
Remember, a great way to support the show is to go on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and give us a rating and a review. It really does make a massive difference for the show. Now, on with the episode.
Right, Matthew, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thank you so much for having me.
No, pleasure. It's rather freezing up here in the northeast at the moment. How's it faring down your way?
Yeah, so in Sheffield here, it's been very cold, very windy, quite bleak, I would say.
Yeah, I think winter is definitely getting upon us, unfortunately. Let's kick off. If you could just give our listeners a bit of background on who you are, what you've done to date, and how you've ended up doing what you do today.
Yeah, absolutely. So originally I was a guitar teacher based in Leicester, which is where I grew up. When I was about 18 or so, I decided that I was really, really passionate about teaching guitar, and it wasn't just a kind of a hobby. It's something I really wanted to continue doing when I went to university. And when I went to university down next, I really wanted a way of generating myself students so I can continue teaching, but I didn't actually know anyone in the area. So I had to kind of figure out a way of finding new students in Exeter as a location. So I started kind of playing around with different ways of advertising myself as a music teacher, and ended up doing that quite successfully. And in my second year of university, I was teaching about 25 hours a week, which was quite a lot while I was trying to do my degree at the same time, and brought on board a second guitar teacher. And then because I do web design as well, I thought, okay, well, why don't I kind of trial this concept of getting websites in Google high enough to generate inquiries for other music teachers that are out there. And since kind of 2011 type time have been doing that. So I set up the first 2 additional websites in 2011. From then, I've kind of slowly expanded out across the UK. I now work with around about 500 music teachers across the UK. And there's been about 37,500 student inquiries that come through. And it's been a very crazy journey, I'd say, over the last kind of 10 years or so. Provisionally as a guitar teacher who's ended up working with a huge community of music teachers to help them find students.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, just the numbers that you've sort of gone through there is brilliant in terms of how many people you've reached, touched, and helped sort of progress on their journey as well as a musician.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was a real vision for me, I guess, two elements of it. One, I've always had this fascination that at some point in one of the lessons that one of the teachers I work with are teaching, they are teaching the next Kurt Cobain, they're teaching the next Slash, the next Alex Turner is sitting there in one of these lessons, the person that is going to have a profound impact on the music industry as we know it. And just I get a huge buzz off the idea that might have come through one of the websites that I built, or through one of the teachers I work with, we might help shape that music vision in the future. So yeah, really excited. Hopefully that might happen. Who knows? Yeah,
well, and with, like you say, with the amount of people that you're reaching, there's a reasonable chance that that's going to happen. To whatever level, there's obviously a lot of people out there who are progressing on that journey because of you and what you've done. So that's absolutely great. So I mean, what drew you towards music in the first place? At what point did you get the music bug?
Oh, that is a great question. For me, I went to a small music festival when I was, I think, maybe 11 or 12, and someone had just bought this CD and put it on the little stereo player, and I didn't know at the time, but like this band called Nirvana were playing, and it just captured me. Like I couldn't describe it. It just conveyed the emotions that I had. I mean, prior to that point, everyone has the music that their parents play in the car to them, and that was just music. But this was like speaking to me directly, and the sound of the raw guitar, and it was just this immediate connection, and I just became fascinated with Nirvana as a band, and really went out of my way to find their music, get involved in their music in terms of listening to as much as I could, and eventually wanted to replicate that by playing that music. And that's how I got into playing guitar, really, is just that immediate connection with Nirvana as a band.
I think everyone has that one band or musician that really got
absolutely.
Them in. Yeah. Okay. Well, one of the main things that we wanted to talk about today was both of why I think we are doing what we do at the moment is to help musicians on their journey. And we know that a lot of musicians will still be holding down full-time jobs, and
that brings with it a whole host of challenges in terms of, you get home 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock after a shift, you're already knackered by the time you've eaten, and then it's straight out to practice or to the gig, and just fitting things in can be a massive challenge. And so what we wanted to look at is, well, how can potentially the day job help? And almost, rather than being the blocker, be almost of an enabler as much as anything to help people on their career. You yourself have crafted a career in the music world. So just initially want your thoughts on some of the big challenges, and set the scene a bit of the challenges that you see on a regular basis in terms of musicians who are got that fight almost between the time they have to be creative versus the time they have to put money in their pocket.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess we can approach this from different points of view, and for musicians in different phases. So, for example, a musician who is a gigging musician who also has a job, but maybe has never taught music and maybe never considered teaching music as a sustainable income through music. I would kind of put this kind of concept forward to them and say, actually, music education is a fantastic thing to do for many reasons. One of them being you can be your own boss as a self-employed music teacher who's maybe teaching students from their own home or traveling to students' houses to teach. You could take on as many or as few hours as you wanted to. The pay points are quite nice. Teachers will charge everything from 20 to £35 an hour, depending on the city, depending on the instrument, depending on the demand. So it can be quite a rewarding source of income comparatively to many minimum wage jobs out there that unfortunately musicians end up doing to support their gigging lifestyle. It can also be a more consistent form of income compared to gigging, and what I mean by that is many of the musicians that I work with go through phases as they are in their band where, for example, the festival period is intensely busy and they'll be earning quite a lot of money, but other times of the year actually there is not that many gigs, or maybe they're not actually being able to have that creative time. Maybe a member of their band's away, or this, that, and the other. And actually, a consistent income is about meaning that maybe every week or every month that you have a similar amount of income across the year. And I think we all seek that as individuals and also musicians. So for that group of people, I would really recommend exploring that concept with a caveat. And I think the caveat is not all great musicians make great teachers. And the reason I say that is that actually, I think if you move into the kind of teacher space and music education space, you need to be, an individual that is really willing to learn about how to teach music, which is a very different skill in many ways of how to play it. I think we can all imagine being in a guitar lesson where we have a great guitarist in front of us who is just fantastically showing off all the solos that they can play, but not actually really communicating those solos and how to play them to the student. So there is that caveat. But having said that, musicians are a group of people who are inherently often passionate about other people. They're passionate about music, and they're often passionate about communicating that, whether that is through the performances they do or through sitting down with another person who's really passionate about music. Often they can find with maybe a bit of training that they are really able to communicate these ideas to another individual and can get a huge joy from it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, we're through speaking sort of off air, we're both big football fans, and I think there's a massive similarity there in terms of a lot of players who go into management. You could be the best player in the world, but that doesn't mean you're going to be the best manager.
Agreed.
And I think that resonates, and it's interesting. I totally agree with you in terms of the passion that musicians typically have for helping one another. What's some of the perhaps behavioural traits that might lend someone towards that teaching? The immediate one that springs to mind is patience, for example.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd really agree with patience. I also think there is this kind of level of understanding of what it's like to sit in the student's shoes. So empathy is a really big one. And what I mean by that is when you start teaching guitar, it's been so long since you were terrible at guitar, you've literally forgotten what it's like to be a beginner student. And what I mean is, specifically, you might have a student come into a lesson and they physically don't have the strength in their fingers to fret a note. They can just make some kind of buzzy sound out of the guitar. And that is the level that you need to be pitching your first few lessons to a very nervous beginner guitar student. And actually, we often forget as more advanced guitarists just what a basic stage we were during our first few months, where we didn't know how to hold a plectrum, and we couldn't even hear if our guitar was in or out of tune, and we forget all of that stuff because we're advanced guitarists now. So empathy for me is the big one, and understanding what it's like to be in the student's shoes is a must for good music teachers.
Yeah, no, Ben will testify to this, but I mean, I didn't really personally get too far beyond that stage of being able to, well, yes, I can hold a plectrum now, but anything beyond playing some very basic sort of chords. And you're right, at the time, I remember Ben being able to play whatever, and he just like, off he goes, right? And I'd be looking at it going, right, I can look at you doing that, but that doesn't help me whatsoever. I don't know how you've just moved your fingers in that sort of way, and it's something that I know from just for example, there's lots of YouTube videos out there where you can watch somebody doing something, and I guess that could get you so far, but it certainly wouldn't have really helped me get beyond a very basic level of ability.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting point to pick up on. And for me, a few years ago, with the teachers I work with, there was a concern of, will YouTube, outcompete music teachers? And actually, I had a very different response to this. Is that YouTube is great as a resource, and there's many different videos and teachers out there. But what I find that particularly beginner students need more than anything is someone that can curate the information, the learning process for them, so they know what is a logical process to go through for song 1, song 2, song 3, etc., so that they can learn in a way that is really constructive and builds upon the knowledge that they've learned during that process. The thing that makes YouTube really challenging as a platform is, as a beginner student, you might not know what is a good song to start off with. I've had students turn up to lesson and want to learn Jimi Hendrix in the first lesson, which is just, no one's going to be able to do that during the first lesson. And yet, on YouTube, there'll be lessons out there, and they'll be trying to play these songs that actually are, several steps ahead of where they are. And that makes for a very frustrating process. So YouTube is a great resource, but I say having someone who can curate that knowledge is something that's really useful where music teachers come in.
I think that makes sense. I think one of the things that sprung to mind when you were talking there was, right, if I'm somebody who is thinking about going into becoming a music teacher, one of the first things I would be thinking is, oh, bloody hell, I've got to craft a lesson now. Like, I've got to plan something. Do I need like a series, a curriculum almost? Like, what do I do? How do I get from being able to play the guitar to then have some kind of structured formal learning process that I can deliver?
I mean, that's a really great point. And ultimately, I've worked with many guitarists that are kind of entering into this industry as early stage guitar teachers, and I'm very interested in working closely with guitar teachers to formulate what I would call like a foundation course of guitar lessons. So when someone turns up with a guitar that they don't know how to play, where do you start? And often there are common themes of places to start from. So, for example, there's some key riffs that most guitar students start with. Something like Seven Nation Army, for example, is a great and classic riff for students to learn. And often it's about helping these students feel comfortable during their first lesson and feel like they've learned something and something they can build on. And as the first kind of, let's say, 5 to 8 lessons go by, you're just building on these skill sets, increasing their finger strength through a range of different simple riffs, maybe looking at some like open chords, so just getting into this understanding that they can use some different kind of chord shapes and movements between them and being practiced. And then you kind of get to this phase where you can start looking at things like power chords or bar chords. And that is such a significant moment for any student, because as everyone knows, bar chords are particularly difficult to play and particularly frustrating for beginner stage guitarists, in the sense that actually trying to get any sound out of these bar chords is a real nightmare. So having particular songs that you can draw upon that makes that process easier. So, for example, when I would kind of build up towards this, I might use something like Brain Stew by Green Day is a great one, in terms of being able to move these power chords down in one position, and it's just helping that student kind of move from fret to fret, but keeping that same finger shape there. It's just building up this kind of finger strength, and then you start looking at other songs that might enable them to do kind of full bar chords and moving between bar chords and open chords, and actually that kind of building that kind of curriculum. You can select particular songs that really help students kind of go through the process of building the foundations of learning to play guitar. And then what you do is you kind of weave in along the way the musical interests they have. So they might turn up and say they want to play Ed Sheeran, or they want to play Metallica. But you need to weave these different genres and styles into their learning, so they feel like it's a personalised learning. So that would be my approach. And I think there's some great resources out there on the internet to help early stage guitar teachers to do that. But yeah, you can definitely create a foundation guitar course.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I guess that feels like there's, for someone who's been doing it for quite a while, what I'm sort of hearing there a lot was, a lot of this you'll pick up and you'll learn and you gain experience, and therefore this is my go-to song when someone's at this stage, and so that makes sense. So mentioned the whole, okay, I'm gonna have to learn how to structure a lesson, how to build up all those things. What are the other types of things that I need to become good at? I mean, in many ways, if somebody's coming from a DIY musician perspective, you already know and potentially have already been trying to build a lot of the other skills about running your band as a business almost. So what are the other key skills, I guess, outside of maybe the teaching bit, that you also need to develop?
Absolutely. Yeah. This is a really interesting question, something that I've, I guess, worked with quite closely with different music teachers. It's everything else besides having the student in front of you in that lesson. Like, what is all the skills that you need? And one particularly stands out for me, and that's customer service, which is a very strange subject to come talk about, because we musicians don't necessarily think of something so corporate as customer service. Yeah. The way you answer emails and how prompt you are in answering those emails from music students can make a difference of whether they book in a lesson with you or not. And your approach and your enthusiasm in that reply email can really make that student feel more at ease at coming to that lesson. And again, I go back to the empathy point, is that for a music student, turning up for that first lesson is a really nerve-wracking experience. I mean, just getting the student through the door, in the sense that they've come and they've turned up and they're meeting a stranger for this first time on a subject that they don't know very much about, which is inherently quite a worrying thing to do, and they've kind of opened themselves up for this experience to have. I just really think that we as music teachers should really help reassure these worries at the first kind of stage of talking to music students, and also as we kind of go through this process of getting to know the students and dealing with other aspects of when it comes to payments and, for example, different aspects like that, arranging lessons, that we do this in a way that we really recognise that we want to give the best service as we possibly can as music teachers to these students. As I say, it sounds quite a corporate thing, but actually customer service is such a huge part of what good music teachers are able to deliver to their students.
Yeah, I can imagine straight away anyone who comes across, most likely accidentally, but if any communication, whether it's email or phone call, is a bit aggressive or standoffish or superior or anything, you can totally see how that's just instantly just going to move someone from I'm looking forward to going to my lesson next week to I am now dreading. And this should be a really fun experience, right? You're learning an instrument. It should be a fun thing. So that makes sense. Maybe it's a daft question. Do most lessons take place at the student's house, or?
It's a really good question, and it's an interesting answer. So different teachers prefer different things. A lot of teachers do teach from their own home premises. There is a group of teachers that will teach at a third-party location. So, for example, most drum teachers I work with work in a drum studio or a music studio that has drums. I'm sure there's sound reasons for this. And there is also a group of teachers that will travel to different students. And again, it depends on the instrument. So there's less drum teachers who travel to students' houses, which again makes sense. But guitar is an instrument that obviously you're able to physically take to the student's house. So it does lend itself quite nicely for that. I think there is also a locational aspect to it. So there's teachers I work with in kind of like the more rural parts of Yorkshire, for example, that they cover a much wider area and are mobile teachers and will take the music to wherever the students are located. Whereas someone in a city maybe like Bath, for example, because the city size is quite small, it has quite a high student population, most people are able to travel from anywhere in Bath to wherever the teacher is located. So inherently that kind of prompts a more kind of a situation where the teacher is located in a singular place.
Okay, so whether it be teacher's house, student's house, third party neutral venue, what does an environment, what does a room look like that's geared up for learning? What kind of atmosphere should someone look to create, or what do you need on hand, or what does that mean?
Yeah, this is a great question, and one thing I can say, and we've got quite a lot of data on this, is if you have a good learning environment, the longevity of the students that you will teach in terms of how long will they stay a student of yours increases massively, because people love to turn up to a place where they feel that it's got a great atmosphere, great environment, and it's going to be the obvious things. It's going to be how much light does that room have? Is it quite a nice warm environment where you feel that you're welcomed and you feel that you're safe in that place? Is it an environment where all the resources are kind of immediately to hand, or is a teacher having to walk off to go and find something elsewhere in the house? Having good quality equipment is a bonus, but it's not necessarily the most important thing as you're starting out. Students are able to and normally quite open to learning on pretty average equipment if the lessons are really good. So I would be more enthusiastic about a teacher finding a really nice location to teach from, making the location really accessible, really nice location to teach from, rather than buying an expensive guitar and sitting in a really dark, mouldy old room somewhere and trying to teach from there. So I'd really consider those elements of it. There are many teachers that I work with that have thought quite carefully about different things that they have in and around the room to create that atmosphere, whether it's posters of musicians they like, small bits of music memorabilia, musical notes on the wall. All of these different things add to what is a customer experience. It's a student turning up and feeling that they're really getting something, not just the lesson information, the content. Often they're building a relationship with the music teacher and really feeling very connected to that teacher. And at the same time, they're feeling like they're really looking forward to going to that physical location where their music lessons take place, because it's a really nice place to learn.
Yeah. Oh, I could just see it. Oh no, it's that time of the week where I've got to go and sit on that grubby chair on the sticky floor in this really cold place where I'm going to be shivering for the next versus the opposite end of the scale. It is just I turn up, I had a drink when I arrive, or whatever. It's back to the customer service point in many ways, I guess, but the environment to learn in, that makes a lot of sense. This week is brought to you in partnership with MGR Music. Ever wanted to learn an instrument, hone your skills, or pick up something completely new? You can get so far by yourself, however professional guidance can make all the difference. With a network of tutors right across the UK and rates starting from as little as £15 per hour, visit mgrmusic.com now to get started.
So it's that point in the show, James, just halfway through, and it's Matthew's Charity of the Week.
Yeah, so the first place that we kind of expanded into was Belfast. My family actually from Belfast, and there is the Wave Trauma Centre in Belfast that provide care and support for people affected by the Troubles in Northern Ireland. And we were lucky enough to be able to provide some guitar lessons and classes there. Just for myself as an individual and for family that come from Northern Ireland, it's been something that's been really good to be involved with. So yeah, please do check that out. Anyone listening in Northern Ireland, and if you have something you're able to offer the community through the centre, then I'd really recommend doing it.
If you want to find out more about Wave Trauma Centre, just go to wavetraumacentre.org.uk to find out more. Now back to the show.
So if I've now I've got my lesson plan, I've picked my environment, I've covered a lot of the things, I've noticed that there's already one or two guitar teachers in my sort of area. Therefore, I'm thinking, is this really for me? Or how much demand is out there? What do you see in terms of student to teacher sort of population?
Well, when I first moved down to Exeter and was really passionate about starting up my own guitar teaching business down there, I went to some of the local music shops and providers of music education down there, and was kind of quite flatly told, we don't need another guitar teacher here. All the guitar students that need to learn guitar are learning currently with the teachers that are out there. And I thought, you know what, I think there is more room for guitar teachers. And the reason that I know that, or knew that at the time so strongly, is I've been put on a 2-year waiting list in Leicester to learn to play guitar.
Really?
With the Leicestershire Arts, and ended up having a family friend teach me to play guitar, because the waiting list was so long to get around to having lessons with a so-called council-approved teacher. So I knew that there is a massive demand for music education out there. There is always a demand, I would say, for instruments that are in the public eye. And what I mean by that is you see shows like X Factor and Britain's Got Talent that really, really push this concept of having a skill that you show off to people. And one of the kind of go-to skills often is things like singing, for example. And we've seen inherently the numbers of inquiries we get about, hey, I really want to audition for X Factor or Britain's Got Talent, generally pushes inquiries and interest up from particularly younger individuals coming through. So I have also seen, as we've gone through different phases of running this business, that musical interests change. So we've had, particularly over the last few years, a real interest in learning acoustic guitar, and you could probably work out which particular famous male solo acoustic guitar singer who's prompted all of that. And it wouldn't surprise me, in a few years' time, if there was a particularly big, let's say, rock band or other type of band that comes through in a different genre that really captures particularly the young people's ears, as it were, that will prompt inquiries coming through in that way. So as people get, just like the earlier when we talked about kind of where did my interest kind of come from in music, I think as people get really enthused about whatever music it is, they want to express that by learning it, by playing it, and then by evolving it, however they can create it.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, actually. How have you seen trends change, I guess, since you've started this, or have there been, aside from the acoustic guitar element, how's it evolved, or what differences have you seen?
Yeah, so I've definitely seen changes and shifts, and we'll talk specifically about guitar. So kind of when I started, we had a range of kind of these big American bands that a lot of young people, and I particularly highlight young people as they're coming through. And the reason for that is when you teach, people, let's say between the years of 30 and 65, it tends to be by that age group, they pick the music they like, and broadly they don't change too much. They might like the odd song currently, but they pick what they like. For younger people, when I started teaching guitar, these big American bands, we're talking about Green Day, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Foo Fighters, these big bands were really influencing the rock music that the students were learning. Then we had this kind of rise of British rock, so bands like Arctic Monkeys, Libertines, for example. And then more recently, we've kind of had a bit of a lull. We kind of had what I would say is kind of a bit of a gap of really big new rock bands that are coming through. And because of that, I think we've seen this shift away from a lot of the younger students wanting to get their electric guitar out and find their distortion pedal and crank it up to 10. Is actually we've seen this shift moving over to, hey, I really want to learn how to play some Ed Sheeran songs, and how can I be acoustic guitarist? How does the echo pedal work, and what is delay, and all of these kind of questions that are quite different from this concept of distortion. How can we turn up the distortion as much as possible? And that shift has really gone through. But that said, there are always themes, I think, that will always come back again. So I would imagine in the next few years, particularly if there is a British or, I guess, a big American band that really captures the attention of young people and is able to reflect maybe some emotions they have at the minute that are not being reflected by maybe some of the more acoustic-y pop type sounds, that you'll get this big backlash and everyone will want to be playing this music. So I'm waiting for it.
You mentioned age there. It's just something I wanted to touch on. So
sure.
If I'm, like I say, I'm looking to maybe get into this, and I'm saying maybe I'm in my 20s, and I'm very proficient. I think I check all of the boxes, so I think I'm good. And then somebody who's 50 wants a lesson off me, and that suddenly that feels a bit odd. I'm going to be telling someone like much older than me how to do something. That's not something I'm used to. It's always been, you go through your life, and it's, everything you get taught you through school and your parents, it's always, the other way around. I'm thinking whether it's from that perspective or any other things, how does the age differences play out, whether that brings any quirks, interesting features, challenges, interesting
It's a great question. It's a really good question. And, I would say that I kind of turned professional when I was 18 in terms of being a music teacher, and it tends to be, a good chunk of my students were older, and it is something that did play on my mind. And yet I knew after 6 months of teaching that I was really confident as I went into a lesson that the person in front of me, regardless of their age, needed the knowledge that I had, and I wanted to impart that to them. And I found that students were really receptive, because it doesn't matter what age that you sit there at. If the person in front of you can do the thing that you want to do, and they can communicate the knowledge of how to do it, that student is going to listen to that person. And really, really, that is the key. And I think confidence in the teacher's own ability is crucial. And frankly, people will learn from anyone of any age if they've got the information that they want to learn.
Yeah, that makes sense. Another thing that I'd be unsure about, particularly I guess in the early days, is that, and it maybe it touches on the confidence point that you've just mentioned there, is right, how much do I charge? I almost, if I'm new to it, I almost feel like I'm not yet an expert at this. And certainly in the early days, how much should people be paying me to impart? You've mentioned earlier in the it can range, whether it's £20-30 an hour, whatever it might be. How do you almost, whether it's from a novice or whether you're more experienced, how do you assess what you feel is a fair price to charge?
It's a great question. I think I'll talk a little bit about teacher confidence first of all, because I think that will feed into it. And what I can say, and my experience working with many different teachers that have started on this journey, is that you get into your first lesson as a music teacher, and it's true of any teacher, and in that lesson you'll find that there is just a part of your personality that kind of takes over. It's this persona of the teacher within you, and over particularly the first 6 months, you'll really develop that persona, and you'll just snap into your teacher character, the person you are as a teacher. And that will give you a lot of confidence. And it's not the everyday person you normally are. And it's the same, you could imagine, with the teachers you had in school. They weren't the teacher person, you know, when you accidentally saw them at the shops, they weren't, you know, Mrs. Whoever, they were just themselves at that time. So that will give you great confidence as a new music teacher. In regard to how much to charge, it is quite a personal question. It depends on multiple factors. So some of the factors, for example, are location of lessons. So what I mean by that is some cities inherently the prices will have to be lower. Some cities the prices will be higher. It would also depend on the dynamics of the lessons. So do you travel to the students? How far away are the students from you? How do you travel? Are you driving there? If so, what does that kind of contribute to the overall lesson charge? I think for beginner teachers that are just starting out, I would want them to charge something that they felt comfortable and rewarded their time and input into that. And whatever that is, I don't think any music teacher should walk away from a lesson feeling like that they haven't really got the value out from what they're giving. And for different teachers, that means different things. So for some early stage teachers, it feel like it's a big learning process for them. So they're learning and eventually they're going to put their prices up from what they've learned. For other music teachers, actually, I found that they are quite nervous about this price question. So they'll do things, for example, to have, first lesson free, for example, or very low lesson prices. So it might be £10 or £12.50 an hour. And my recommendation really is this is underselling yourself. You know, people out there will be willing to pay for your services. If you've got great customer service, if you're genuinely enthusiastic and able to communicate the information to these students, they'll stay. And often I found people want to pay for really good service. They want to pay for really good knowledge. They want to genuinely really enjoy what they're doing in terms of their music education. So they will pay, and I know this. So have confidence. Be confident about your price point, but with a small caveat is always be flexible. So if you notice that you're charging X and when people find out no one wants to take a lesson, that might suggest that X is a little bit too high. If you're finding that you're fully booked up within 3 months of starting out, it might suggest that X is a little bit too low and you can raise your prices a bit because everyone wants it. So it's a very flexible, quite fluid answer, I guess.
Yeah, and I think the point on trusting the fact that people will pay for your services. I mean, I'm no marketing expert, but it's there's always been the reassuringly expensive point.
Yes.
And if it is too low, then people can often question things the other way in terms of why is it so cheap? Is it not as good? And so I think that is important. So we've covered quite a few things there. What are maybe some of the other perceived barriers that people might have in their mind before thinking about going down this path?
Absolutely. I think one of the challenges is for times, and the reason that is there's a peak time as a music teacher, which is normally between, let's say, 4:30 and 8 p.m. during weekdays, and that tends to be when people come for music lessons. And the reason for that is they've returned home from school, so the kids can come and attend their music lesson. It's maybe that the individuals have finished work and can now kind of attend that lesson. So one of the barriers sometimes is the fact that actually the individual who wants to teach music is already working during these times, or works a shift pattern that makes arranging lessons particularly difficult with their potential students. That is a barrier, I would say, for music teachers who are interested in kind of entering into it. Yet, what I've seen many music teachers do is quite carefully arrange their lesson times as best they can and really get to know their students and try and identify students that maybe can come earlier in the day. So, for example, university students will always say that they want to come, Wednesday at 5 p.m. But the truth is they could probably come at Friday at 10 a.m. when they haven't got a lecture. So getting to know your students and trying to draw them into time periods that are not the peak hours, so that you can either book in more students, or if you're working at those kind of peak hours, that you're able to slowly build up your student numbers. And the most important thing I would say to music teachers or prospective music teachers that are interested in getting into the industry would be, you don't have to quit your job today and become a music teacher tomorrow. What you can do is quite carefully slowly rebalance your income. So maybe you're starting to build up a few students, maybe you have 5 students a week that are bringing in a nice amount of income, and you slowly start reducing hours, or you slowly do other things in terms of moving the students around and taking on a few more students, till you're at such a point where you can make that transition between working full-time, working part-time at your job, and also doing music education. Or, as I say, maybe leaving that job altogether and doing music education as your primary thing. It doesn't have to be a one snap decision. It can be a process over 6 or 12 months.
That makes sense. So if our guitar teacher, our educator, has any spare time, so the time that they're not spending teaching, what type of thing should they be spending their time doing?
It's a really, really good question. And I would say for me, the most valuable thing I found as a music teacher is talking to other people in the music community. And what I mean by that is if you're engaging with, for example, on a retail side of things, local guitar shops, and really getting to know the managers there, for example, they can be a source of referrals of students. They can be also great support. They can be individuals that will help you connect with other music teachers in your area to provide the early stage knowledge that you might need to kind of develop. I guess the other side of things is getting to know local schools and working out how you can maybe promote your stuff with the school's agreement there. So maybe you can put up some posters. Getting to know other places that provide music as an outlet. So there might be some community centres. There might also be some local places that provide gigs or encourage musicians to go in there and start jamming as early stage bands. Essentially, in almost every city, there'll be often segmented but micro communities of different musicians. If you can suddenly start getting to know and networking with all of these people in the community, your name will start, kind of being getting out there as a music teacher and as an individual. And while that might not generate inquiries during week 1, by the end of year 1, suddenly you have all of these people that will be referring to you as, oh yeah, you should go and talk to this guy. He knows how to teach guitar. And then suddenly your business will grow dramatically.
Yeah, no, that all sounds like very good advice. So, is there anything else that we haven't touched on, Matthew, that you think would be some key points that you would want to get across?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I really noticed during kind of the creation of the business that I run is when I started out as a guitar teacher, it's often a very individual thing, being an individual private music teacher, in the sense that it's very easy to offer the guitar lessons in the community and not necessarily communicate with other guitar teachers in that community. Sometimes they feel like they're potential competition, you might be treading on their toes or whatever, and actually what I found is that by enabling music teachers to connect via an online platform like the one we run, is that we're able to help music teachers, particularly let's say guitar teachers in Exeter and Aberdeen, communicate about issues or challenges that they both have, whether that is like last minute lesson cancellations or how to adopt an approach maybe in the foundation lessons that we talked about earlier, and how that kind of collective support can really add so much value to music teachers in their journey. As educators, we also want to help other educators out there doing their role for the students that they teach. And I think there's a real value in connecting music teachers into communities. So what I'd really say and really recommend is, if you're an individual music teacher out there, or if you're someone who's interested in getting involved in the industry as a music educator, you don't have to do this by yourself. There'll be many other music teachers out there that'll be happy to offer support, offer advice, and help you maybe avoid some of the common things that we all trip over when we start teaching music. So, for example, last-minute lesson cancellations is a good example of how to deal with that.
Oh. Well, what's the main thing that springs to mind if I say what's the top thing that would put someone off, or if someone started to go down the path of being a music teacher, and then after week whatever or month X, they've actually had to just sack it off and it just hasn't worked? What's the main thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. The main thing is, where do I get the student from? That's such a tough question early on, before anyone's heard of your name, before, and I'd point back to, yourself in the band or any of the other people that you've interviewed during this podcast, is they went from a point where they weren't known as an artist or a band, and they ended up getting known by enough people to make it a career. And it's much the same as a music teacher. There's a start where you kind of realise that you haven't really got any students to teach, and yet you're going to make this your career. So how do you actually find the students is the biggest barrier to many teachers continuing. And my recommendation really will be, if you imagine that there is a stream of students always coming through in your city where you live that are looking for teachers within that community, and all you have to do is tap into that stream that exists, it's out there. You just have to work out how you can best tap into it. And if you can do that, you will become a part-time or full-time music teacher for as long as you wish to, because there is always a demand for music lessons, in my opinion.
No, it's great advice, and I guess that also ties into the community point in terms of learning from others, how they've tapped into that stream of people as well. So finally, Matthew, where can listeners find out more about yourself and, more importantly, MGR Music that you run?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, mgrmusic.com is the best place to find out a little bit more about myself, and also the music teacher community that is so active and vibrant online, discussing all of the things that we talked about today and much more. So yeah, absolutely. Visit us there at mgrmusic.com.
Or indeed, if anyone wants to find a local teacher to learn from.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. There's been loads of great stuff there that we've covered. So thank you very much, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you very much.
And there we have it, James. It could be a nice double header with Lee Fuge there, as we already mentioned. But both are very enthusiastic about music and teaching music and just helping other musicians do whatever they need to do.
Yeah, helping them on the journey. That's what it's all about. So can't encourage people enough. Go to MGR Music, check them out, go to their website, see what they've got on offer. Since we first sort of started partnering with MGR, they started to add some new features.
You mentioned this, yes.
Yeah, so guitar setups. Loads of people are interested. All right, so Kurt Cobain, what sort of pedals did he have? What guitar did he use? What amps did he have? That sort of thing. Or any, famous guitarist of it. So they're starting to build out, if you're going for a certain type of sound, here's the type of setup that you might want to look at. Yeah. Not like, buy the guitar and the amp and the right pedals and suddenly you sound like such and such.
Yeah, there's a lot to go along with it, alongside that. But
give a bit of a feel for the types of things that you might want to consider if you want to go down a certain direction.
Yeah. I think that'll be a great thing to look into, because your influences will influence you, obviously. So even if it's just a little nod to it, it might just give you that sound, it might give you that inspiration to keep on going.
Or like you could get pedals that annoy the hell out of us for a period of time until you figure out what you actually want to do with it.
I brought this up with season 3 guest, spoiler alert, Russell from Block Party, about that pedal that I bought that you hated and Rob hated and Simon hated. And he loved the fact that I bought it. So it's just the way it is, I guess.
He can love it all he wants. He didn't have to live through the subsequent days, weeks and months after you'd bought it.
I know, but
it's just an anecdotal tale to him. It's a scar on my brain.
It is. But I just thought I'd drop in like, well, season 3, Russell Lissack.
Who's next week, Ben?
Next week we have John Fratelli, the lead singer of, wait for it, the Fratellis. I know you might be shocked by that. But why is he called John Fratelli? Well, you'll just have to wait and find out. But here is a little snippet to wet thou a better.
The only thing that helped was that you knew with this band, alright, this is what it means when something works, this is what it sounds like.
All of the show notes for today's episode can be found at acpgmusic.com, along with our back catalogue of episodes. If you like what you hear, or perhaps have some improvements or specific guests you'd like us to consider, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at info@acpgmusic.com or hit us up on social media. Keep supporting upcoming artists, and we'll catch you next time.